Imagine you're at an arcade, you have so many options of games to play. You could play a claw machine or maybe one of those sitting shooting games, but what really piques your interest are the rhythm games, since you're always busy and maybe you thought, damn, I wish I could take one of those rhythm games home, then I wouldn't need to wait in those long lines. Well, I did, so that's why I went and made essentially a mini version of one of those rhythm games. First off, the idea of me even wanting to do this came from me wanting a little bit more use out of this mini Sound Voltex controller I got from Speedy Labs for $140. By the way, we're going to be adding up most of the cost for this machine. Now I knew I wanted the machine to be no wider than the controller plus the walls, so I measured the controller, then went shopping for the other parts. The next piece I needed to be absolutely sure was small enough was the computer I would end up putting inside. Now there aren't a lot of good options that I could use that aren't Raspberry Pis, and since I didn't want to bother with any sort of weird operating systems or trying to use Linux to compile the software I was going to be using, I needed something small that was able to use Windows. Now there was a computer I was already looking at for other purposes, and that was the Zima board. Now this computer is mainly meant to be a mini server of sort, but since it's passively cooled, I could fit the computer in long ways, and I'm able to install Windows on it. I figured it would work well enough for the project. Now the price on this piece is variable. I got the Zima board model 832 for around $115, though it normally goes for $200, but the cheaper version model 232 goes normally for about $90. And with the computer chosen, I would need two accessories, mainly being an SSD to install Windows on, and then a USB hub, since I would need to connect everything to computer since it only had two USB ports and no headphone port. Now the size of the SSD didn't really matter, but before I had gotten a 512GB SSD, and the one I got was the Team Group T-Force Vulcan, mainly because when I got it originally, it was one of the cheapest I could find in that size, though honestly I could have gotten something smaller like a 128GB model. Anyways, the one that I got ran me about $43 back when I bought it, but again, I could have lowered the cost of that machine by a few dollars if I was trying to lower the cost more. Next up again, I needed to get a USB hub of some sort. Now I already had one sitting around, so I decided to reuse that one, and luckily it had basically everything that I needed, being a couple extra USB ports and a headphone jack. The USB hub that I'm using is one by J5 Create. Honestly, not one of the worst brand names I've ever seen, but this part cost me about $50, bringing our total up to $433, but also because the hub uses a USB-C port to connect, I needed an adapter, adding another $10 or so to the cost. Now with that, we really only needed one more thing, being a monitor, and that was the last thing, except I had to realize that with the current setup, I wouldn't be able to log into Windows or really control anything but the game, so I knew there was one more thing that I wanted to get, and that thing was a mini reprogrammable keyboard, preferably one with a knob to control the volume. So I once again went to Amazon, typed in mini keyboard with knob, and after a little bit of looking, I went and bought the first keyboard I saw, since it was just cheap enough, being about $20. Now honestly, I think if anyone else were to try and build what I'm building, they should choose a different keyboard, as I had to manually type in a long URL to try and download the software that is supposed to be used to reprogram the keyboard, since it doesn't seem to have any sort of link or other way of accessing the software aside from typing it in. But with that purchase out of the way, I'm able to go ahead and look for a monitor that is small enough, has enough FPS, and a decent enough resolution to use for a rhythm game. So again, I went onto Amazon, since this isn't exactly the kind of thing you'll be able to find at a Best Buy or any other normal retailer. Now I didn't want to spend a ton of money on the monitor, since I wasn't even sure how much performance I would be getting out of the computer from earlier, but there were actually quite a few options that I could choose from. Surprisingly, quite a few of them had the power and input on the back of the monitor. While that technically could work, I wanted one where the input was on the sides and didn't have anything else sticking out of the side on the monitor. And as much as I wanted to get the 1080p monitor that I saw, and since I wasn't trying to let the cost of this thing balloon, I again went with the first listing since it was 600p, and at the general requirements I was trying to go with, and that monitor cost me about $40. Now I did think that was done here, except there being, again, one more thing that I needed to get, being a mini DisplayPort to mini HDMI cable, since apparently I didn't have a cable that would connect the computer to the monitor. Also, I just completely forgot whether or not the monitor came with a cable or anything, but again, I just grabbed one of the first cables I saw on Amazon that seemed like it would work, and that ran me another $17. And with that, we had all the parts that we would need, bringing our cost up to about $503 with the chosen parts, but the work had only just begun. Next up, I needed to measure pretty much everything, since I can just measure the length of the computer and haul out the rest of the model to shove everything else inside. So I got to work doing just that. Since I already measured the controller, I went ahead and measured the mini keyboard, and then the monitor. And with that information in hand, I was able to get around to making a 3D model for the case that I'd be making for the entire machine. Now the software I would be using for this endeavor is Rhino 3D, and I know the gold standard for 3D modeling nowadays is Blender, but I learned about Rhino back in high school and I just haven't bothered to learn Blender on top of all the other things I'm trying to learn. like Japanese and marketing. Anyways, I started this process by creating shells for the MIDI controller, the keyboard, and the monitor. Now, not only did I have to create the shells for them, I also had to create holes in each model so that I would have somewhere to put the cables. And I really wish I did a bigger refresher on Rhino before I started this, because when I started making the model, I made it in a way where I had to create separate boxes with each opening for each part, and the cables, instead of creating a bigger box and then just deleting pieces from that to create the mold needed. So after a long time of creating the molds, I was then able to create the shell for the entire thing, which was sort of easier to do since I just had to create an outline and then copy that a few times so I could make it a solid after connecting the outline with the rest of the other pieces of the model. Now initially this is where I stopped making the model, except I needed to cut the model into pieces since my Bambu Labs A1 Mini isn't big enough to print the entire thing. And with that done, I tried printing it for the first time, and while it was sort of functional, I had to glue the entire thing together, which led to it being very difficult to keep in one place or piece, and very difficult to keep just glued together in general. So how did I fix that? I went ahead and reopened Rhino and decided the next best thing to add in this case was little pegs on and holes on each of the different pieces, so I could just kind of slot them together. So after another couple hours of sitting there with a couple of different sized blocks and typing Boolean difference and Boolean join over and over again, I finally had another version of the MIDI rhythm game machine ready to print. And real quick, I gotta complain about Rhino 3D for some reason. Pretty much every other time I tried to use Boolean difference or join, it would do the opposite of whatever it did last time. So I'd have to try and either make the holes or the pegs multiple times just to try and get it to do the right thing. And afterwards, I was ready to print out the machine once again. And while I let my printer do its thing, I needed to get the computer ready to go. First off, since I already had Windows installed on the computer from when I was using it previously, I had to get the software I need to play the game being unnamed STVX clone, and all these songs that would need to be played on it. Now, this ended up taking a while to do since there were quite a lot of songs to download. The downloads consisted of about 8 different packs of songs from a bunch of different games. And of course I would have to unzip the files, since there was about 20 gigabytes worth of files to unzip. Once I got all that done, I just had to open the game once, and set up the game to actually use a MIDI controller. And while I could have done this later since the monitor I got earlier is actually touchscreen, I'd rather just have it done while I still have easy access to a keyboard and a mouse. And with that done, we had one last thing to set up for the game, and that was just to get it to boot up when I logged into Windows later on. So I hit Windows and R, typed in shell:startup, then I created a shortcut for the game's exe file and moved it into there. And with that setup, we were finally able to go and start putting the pieces together. Except I was still waiting on my 3D prints to be done. Now, since I had to sleep and go to work, I wasn't able to be there the exact moment each of the prints was done, so this whole 3D printing process did take around a week, which ended up being just enough time for me to take it somewhere where I was going to get other people's opinions on it. But after every part was printed, we had to put it all together. I grabbed all the 3D printed pieces and got all the components and got to work. Alright, now with all of our stuff printed out and all of our pieces acquired, we can start getting the machine built. First off, we're going to get the controller in the very bottom of the machine. Stick these together. There we go straight in. Afterwards, we're going to want to plug in our USB cable over there. Next up should be this piece here, which is going to hold the first part of the mini little keyboard we're going to have attached to it. Here we go. And next up, this can go in multiple ways, but I'll shove the computer part of it in here now. Gonna get to our USB dock. Get this kind of plugged in. Then we can try to slide the other next piece in here. Get it all ready. Oop. Sort of going in. There we go, those are now together. Now before we move on, I want to start plugging in all the other USB cables that we might need. The connector to the monitor. Oh. The display cable. Just gonna need to come back around inside. And grab our mini keyboard. Probably should have done this earlier as well. That's fine. we go. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and plug in the keyboard to this instead. And we can plug the monitor into the computer itself so it has enough power. Go, it's kind of separated a little bit for now. That is completely fine though. Next up, we're gonna get the piece that the monitor will connect to. Need to get everything all packed inside first. I'm gonna go ahead and put one of these on now, so I can route the cables in there a little bit easier. There we go. The cable's on the outside, I can grab the other piece. Go. Now we can get the monitor, go ahead and get that all connected and put inside. And then we can try to shove all this inside. There we go. Now we just need the top and to hold the monitor back. Go. And the last piece. Go. There we go. Just make sure it actually stays in. Shove it further down. And there we go. Aside from the power cable, we now have our rhythm game machine built. And with that, the mini rhythm game machine was done. The only thing left to do was to take it somewhere to get other people's opinions on it. And where did I decide to take it? Well, a buddy of mine is part of an arcade company called 100 Yen Life, and something they do is operate an arcade out of their warehouse on the weekends while they're not renting out their machines to various conventions. Anyways, here's a little bit of gameplay along with that friend's opinion on the rhythm game machine.
Oh my god, mini Voltex.
Mini Voltex.
Yeah, I
It
guess
is popular.
I don't know. I
800K on
was
Mobius.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, I got 3 guys showing up. Well, you're gonna get 3. Like, so that's the thing. If you're gonna have a pass anyways, like, why?
Well, it's a higher score.
You don't need that.
Because there's
Oh,
some
nice.
motherfuckers
From last time?
I'm not sick, so I went
Track failed. But I can totally pass it.
it's
like-
and I have not been back since.
Oh, go ahead.
Because
Go
it
ahead.
was taking
No, yeah, okay.
Let's say, what are your first impressions? What do you like? What do you don't like?
I mean, the controller always feels good. I think the knobs are really good. The settings need to adjust a little bit so that, the lasers are more, like, accurate. Because I think I have to move it, or I have to move the knobs a lot in order to make the lasers actually, like, switch correctly. But other than that, everything feels good. Do a Switch 2 moment and upgrade this to 120 Hz and I'll be a happy camper.
I'm not sure if they sell any monitors that small with that big of a FPS. Also, it is touchscreen, so if you want to mess with the settings, you can do that.
You can do it.
They didn't have the schedule on.
Yeah, true. If you're gonna pay for one of these, how much would you pay for it?
For this setup, I'd say controller. What would you even call this? Just a control panel?
Yeah,
Something like that? Screen? 3D print? Oh yeah. Yeah, if you could slim it down, like 300-400.
Cool. I think that's less than how much that costs to actually make it. So,
Cool. Yeah, because filament's not going to cost you too much.
Yeah.
It's mainly the,
maybe it cost me like 2 rolls of filament.
yeah, it's going to be the back end and then just the front hardware,
Gotcha.
which is literally everything. So.
Okay, sounds good. I'll need to work on this more.
You will make 10.
Now, there were other people there who gave some opinions on it that I wasn't really able to get on video, and some of those responses were things like, it'd be nicer if the resolution were higher, the machine was kind of sharp at the corners, though that one could be fixed by me by either sanding down or adding curves to the edges, and that the FPS, of course, could always be higher. But overall, the responses to the rhythm game machine was pretty positive. Most people were intrigued by it, and it did end up getting a lot of playtime by the people that were there. And I think part of that is because the actual rhythm game machines that were there almost always have a queue on them. So the machine kind of serves its purpose. I'm going to leave links to everything that I used in the description down below. None of them will be affiliate links, so I won't be making anything off of whatever pieces you do use. But feel free to make one of these for yourself if you'd like. But hey, what do you think of the video? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe, and maybe tell me how much you would pay for one of these.